To begin, we will be starting off with the NASCAR truck Toyota Tundra TRD Pro. This truck has a lot of power to put it down, handles fairly okay, and it's just a very enjoyable car to go drifting around, but it's also a very enjoyable car for big open tracks, such as Charlotte, Daytona. So for a NASCAR truck, it does its purpose pretty well. And with that, we'll put it at a solid B tier. So that's a good way to start it off. Up next is the Street Stock Panther C1. It's been rather positive. The lobbies that I've driven in this car, of course, have been not as friendly, but they do serve what it's worth. It's a good starter car to get into the Cup Series, and with that, we'll put it at I would say like a high C, a high C tier. A high C tier will do. Up next is the Legacy Dallara DW12. It's an Indy car that is used for Charlotte, other circuits like Spa-Francorchamps. And I did enjoy this car while I was driving it. I highly recommend it for all the newcomers of iRacing to try it out. If I had to put it between, if I had to put it on this list though, I would say I'd give it like a good B ranking. It's a very solid car. Up next is the Volkswagen Jetta TDI Cup, and this one probably is the worst car that I've ever driven in my life, and I'll put it on to D. Up next is the Dallara IR18. This car is what I drive for the CIL League. I would have to give it also a B tier. It handles relatively okay. It's not as fast and powerful as the one Formula car I have in mind. It's still a lot faster than the first Formula car I've driven, and it's a very well-rounded middle. So with that, I'll have to put it just a little bit above A tier. I think it is definitely better than the NASCAR, definitely better than the Legacy Dallara DW12, and anything beats that horrible Jetta. Well, almost everything. Is the Audi R8 LMS Evo 2 GT3. It's a very odd but very satisfying car to drive around. It's got a V10 in it, so it sounds phenomenal. And when I was driving it in Watkins Glen to kind of test out if it's good for CIL, I realized that it holds a lot of potentials in some corners, but in other corners it tends to fall off. Is it better than the Dallara? I would say so, which is why I'm going to put it above in the A tier section. Alrighty, up next is the Dirt Micro Sprint Car. I do kind of enjoy a little bit of the drive, but I don't think it's better than the DW12 or the NASCAR truck. So with that, we'll put it at a higher C tier than the Chick Hicks Cup car. Now up next is the Mazda MX-5. This one is an absolute S tier. It is a perfect starter, great to learn around in the sports car tracks. It's very easy to use, very easy to manipulate, and I highly recommend it for those who just join. Up next, we have the Volkswagen Beetle. This one I'll have to put it at D tier. I'm not the biggest enjoyer of iRacing's rally sessions. I mean, not that there's much rally sessions to begin with, but I'm not a particular fan of this VW. It just feels kind of off. Everywhere I drive, it doesn't feel proper to me. So I'm not quite a big fan of it. So overall, it's on D tier, but it's not as bad as the Jetta. Now up next is the Dirt Mini Stock, and I have to put this at S tier because I think every single dirt car, or almost every single dirt car, has always given me a very positive impression on it. It feels fantastic. You have plenty of power around the corners, and it's just a very fun car to slide around. Now up next is the Formula 4 car. It is the first Formula car that I've ever driven, probably the first car that I've ever driven in iRacing, and the first car that I've raced with the CIL. And with that, I have to put it at S tier and even greater than the mini dirt stock. It holds a special place in my heart. I enjoy every bit of it. It's very slow. I think slower than the Miata. It is a car that I always go back to the basics when it comes to racing. And when you start driving like faster cars like the Super Formula or the Dallara or the Legacy Dallara W12 DW12, you take a little bit of pride that you first practice with the Formula 4. So for those who are first starting out iRacing, these three on S tier are a highly recommended group of cars that I would really recommend you trying to use in your first few sessions. Up next is the Toyota GR86, and with that one, I'd have to put it at a B tier. It's not better than the NASCAR, but it is better than the DW12. And the reason why I put that is mainly the sound. I know you can put so many other liveries on it, and it drives relatively good, but it just sounds so awful. Up next is Dirt Street Stock. To put it at another S tier, this car has even more power, I would assume, than the Dirt Mini Stock, but it's also just as fun and just as forgiving in the corners and handling. So again, S tier dirt car, highly recommend you use it. You're gonna have a blast. Up next is the Formula V, and I never really understood the liking of this car, so with that, I'll put it at C tier. C tier is more of a accurate spot for it, probably on the higher end of C tier. It's not my preferable cup of tea, but I may be bad at it. I don't know. Now up next is the SCCA Spec Racer Ford, and I mean I don't know. It handles beautifully. Very high praise for this car, and I really do enjoy driving it in places like Road America, Road Atlanta, just every other circuit that I can think of. So for that, I'll put it to S tier. Now up next is the Subaru WRX STI, and this one, it's not as bad, but if I had to give an honest review on where it would be, I would have to put it on B tier. It's okay. I kind of understand how to utilize it, how to work on it, and it's pretty fun when you get the hang of it. Up next is the Formula Renault 2.0. This one I have to put at C tier, at a mid C tier. It's more or less of a disappointment. I have no real power coming out of the corners. The grip is just it kind of happens, it kind of doesn't happen, really just depends. Um, but the design looks great on it. Is it I would have to put it better than the Formula V though. It's not better. It's not worse than the Formula V. It's at least drivable, and it's got some power, but it doesn't. It feels like it has more power than the Formula 4, but it doesn't have nearly enough power to make me feel, okay, wow, this is actually fun. This actually makes it very challenging to drive. No, it's just a very boring Formula car. Next is the Dirt UMP Modified. I was trying to drive it around the same dirt track as I did with the other stock dirt cars, but I never really got the handling to where I wanted it to be. It just felt very odd. It didn't feel right, and that could be a very bad track idea. It could be a very bad um, technique that I'm using. But with that, I'll put it at a low B tier because I think if I put it on the right track, I can definitely squeeze out the enjoyment and the power from this vehicle, and I can make it a very fun experience for me. But for now, it is at B tier. Now we have probably the most controversial take, I think. It is the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup 992. And with that, we will put it at D tier.
Move this man!
I do not care what everyone says here. I don't like this car. It just feels wrong, and it just feels very awkward to be in. It may be a skill issue, you may be right, but the fact is I've driven this car for a fair share amount of my time. And I know for a fact that it doesn't feel right, and I don't connect with it. So with that, we're putting it at D tier. So we switch from one of the worst cars on this list to probably the best car on this list, and that is the Super Formula SF23.
Yes! Yes!
This is probably the best car on this list. Hands down. S tier all the way. Even higher than the Miata. And the reason I say this is because there's a huge margin of error that can be made in this vehicle. But when you learn how to properly handle and master this car, it is such a rewarding feeling to drive it that you fall in love with it.
Alongside Adrian Tubakovic's car, that excellent St. Clair College paint scheme. It's over now! Cam Davidson just took the lead in one false swoop of a move. And look at that man go. Tubakovic is not done. The man wants it back. He is going to find the turn 3. He's got Ari Muhammad Ali to the outside. The man's got a lot of talent in front and behind, but he is holding firm.
A big wiggle out of there, out of Tubakovic. He's going to try to make a move here. I think Caleb Davidson's got to slow down. He's got to give up a position as Tubakovic. He gets passed by Ar Muhammad Ali there going into turn 6. A big lockup from Tubakovic to take the lead back.
You will never see this ever again. Adrian Tubakovic actually passed Ar Muhammad Ali for position on the track. We're now drafting. We may be going 3 wide. We're 3 wide in turn 10. Last of the late breakers. It's Bradley Skaker. He is taking the lead in turn 8 and 8 and 8. Here comes Adrian Tubakovic. He's back to the inside. He's sniffing his diffuser. He's loose. Here comes Sally.
Feels amazing. This sounds amazing too. So if you're a beginner looking to go into intermediate racing, or in intermediate racing going to expert racing, and you just need to find a proper session to really elevate your level, I highly recommend picking up this car. This is probably the best car on this block, by far. The Pontiac Solstice. I was fairly unimpressed. It was a very boring car, but it handled a lot better than some of the other cars on this list. And with that, we'll put it at a high C tier. It's kind of there. It's got that grip. Now, up next is the 34 Coupe. I never really found the joy with this car, but it's good to have, it's good to learn, and it's definitely one of the stepping stones to get into the higher cup racing sessions. So with that, we'll also put it at C tier, probably just below the Solstice. Alrighty, up next is the Ray FF 1600. This one is also similar to the Formula V, and I'm not really a huge big fan of this, so just a very simple C tier will do. Now, up next is the Legacy NASCAR trucks, Chevrolet Silverado from 2008. This one is probably a very high A tier car. It has plenty of power. It's got a very decent handling set on it, and I've driven this car for both D-ranked racing and unranked racing, but I just kept enjoying it. It's a very interesting cup car to drive on. Up next is the Kia Optima, right to be D tier where it belongs. Now up next is the Trophy Truck. Remains an A tier car, but the reason why it's not an S tier is because it only has 3 gears. If it had 4 gears and had a little bit of a bigger power band, then this would have been a very easy mid S tier slotted car. So for that, we're going to put that A tier. Now up next is a a car that I haven't really considered a higher level until now. It is the Cadillac V Series R GTP car. And with that, we'll have to put it at a very respectful A tier. I've enjoyed it driving a lot. It also makes you use your brain quite often, more times than not. When I first drove this car, I would say about 8 months ago in the previous session, I didn't like it at all. If I had to do that, if I did that, this tier list 8 months ago, it would be at a C tier or a D tier. But when I drove it in Road Atlanta for a few laps and really started to manipulate its settings, I kind of grown fond to it. It has a system that every time you brake, it recovers electrical energy, and that electrical energy powers some rotors in the car that you get a little extra boost out of it. It makes you use your brain a little bit to see, okay, which sectors can I use it on attack mode and which sectors can I use it on building. And when you put it on build, you don't have that electrical support anymore. So you're back to just the engine, just the VA sounding engine, which isn't a problem. But you suffocate in power, and when everyone else is using power, the electrical power battery in the car, you tend to get a little bit slower. So you really have to decide when to build up energy again. But with that, we'll put it at the highest A tier. It is better than the Audi, I will have to say. Next is the Radical SR8. This one I have to put at a very medium, a very medium A tier. I've driven on a few courses, and the way how this car handles and delivers power and the downforce on this car is very solid. So with that, just a very solid all-around car. I will have to put it at A tier. Now up next is the Ferrari 296 GT3 car, and this one has to go at A tier. It is probably better than the Miata as well. I think I've grown very fond of this Ferrari, as well as learned a few things about this car that I can implement now in Formula cars. And the reason why I like this car so much is that it is so forgiving on every single corner you take it. The traction aids on this car will help you steer it out of a tight spot. It has a lot of power to put down on. And even when you're about to spin out, the Ferrari can keep you on the ground, planted, and it is very easy to recover it. Of course, I've said it in like lots of my streams over the times, and I just think it's a very fantastic car. So with that, we have to put it at S tier. Alrighty, we have 2 more to go, so let's knock them down. Up next is the Cadillac CTS V race car. And this one I have to put at a very mild D tier. It has plenty of power and it sounds fantastic, but there's like there's no handling features on it at all. It steers awful, and it doesn't. It's like the tires are bald right on the moment you set your wheels down. It doesn't. There's a lot of power to. There's lots of reserves of power, but there's no handling whatsoever, which makes it a little bit unenjoyable. So for that, that is why we put it on D tier. And finally, we have the next gen NASCAR Toyota Camry. This is the NASCAR that I don't use at the moment, but will be using in the next seasons of CIL. And with the experience I've driven on it, for both some circuits and mostly NASCAR, I have to put it at a very high, respectable A tier. It's not better than the Dallara. I think I'll move the Dallara a little bit up. Yeah, that's a fair spot. It's not better than the trophy car, but it is much better than the NASCAR truck car, the 86. And that is because there's a lot of reserves of power, but it has a fair share amount of handling. The suspension on it is very light, so it takes the bumps on the courses very well, and it's got that V8. I don't know what else to say. It just sounds fantastic. So with that, we'll put it at A tier. So in conclusion, this is the 10 follower special tier list of cars that I've driven. Thank you very, very much for the 10 followers. Thank you very much for the support. I really do mean it. I don't post a lot of videos as often or a lot of streams as I hope I want to, but I'm a busy guy. So I always try to make time for you guys, and it's clear to me that you guys also make time for me, and I really do appreciate that. So if you haven't already, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to put a comment down to see whether this tier list is valid or not to you, and make sure to subscribe to catch up on the latest news and videos that might come around. And with that, good night, good day, and see you next time.